Welcome to the Justice Journal podcast. I'm Sacramento County District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert. I hope you enjoy this podcast series where we discuss important public safety issues and provide insight into who we are as an office and what we do both in the courtroom and in the community to provide the highest level of public safety through prosecution, prevention, and innovation.
Welcome to the Justice Journal podcast. I'm Assistant Chief Deputy District Attorney Thien Ho. The national fentanyl epidemic has hit the Sacramento community and the surrounding areas. People in Sacramento are now dying from fentanyl poisoning at higher rates than gun-related homicides. For example, from January 1st of 2020 to December 9th of 2021, Sacramento County has recorded 157 homicides that are gun-related, while we've experienced 198 fentanyl-related deaths. These fentanyl deaths include people from all backgrounds and all age groups. In 2021, 15% of the deaths were people under the age of 21. 12 were between the ages of 16 and 20 years old, and 1 was 15 years old. The Sacramento District Attorney's Crime Lab tests narcotics that are seized by local law enforcement. In 2021, our crime lab found that 99% of the common street pill tested, oxycodone and etc., were fake. The lab then discovered that of those fake pills, nearly 99% of them contain fentanyl. It takes a very small amount of fentanyl to kill someone. Just half a pill or a few grams can be deadly. 2 grains of salt, the equivalent of, can be fatal for most adults. The drugs that have been seized by local law enforcement and submitted to the crime lab contained fentanyl in 2020, included 622 pills, along with powder and other forms of drugs. That's enough fentanyl in those pills to kill nearly 45,000 adults. Now, fast forward to the amount of drugs that were seized by local law enforcement and submitted to the crime lab in 2021 increased by 4-fold. Approximately 165,000 counterfeit pills were seized during that period of time. And that amount was enough to kill 182,000 people. This is a major epidemic that is not only hitting Sacramento County, but many other areas of not only our state, but our country. My guests today are helping to stem the tide of fentanyl poisoning. I want to welcome and introduce Chris and Laura Didier, parents to Zachary, forever 17, Allyssia Funicello, sister to Mikhail, forever 23, and Fire Chief Walt White. Thank you so much for being here today. So I want to start first with Chris and Laura. Can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Zach?
Sure. Thank you so much for putting this on. When we lost our son to this tragedy, an epidemic we weren't aware of, we really made that decision to be public and share our story because Zach was just the boy next door. He was an incredible kid. He was a 17-year-old high school senior, self-taught musician, loved playing piano every day, straight A student, loved by everyone, lit up a room, just an incredible kid. He was the youngest of 3, and our other 2 children had never had any misuse of alcohol or drugs, and we weren't seeing any of that as well in Zach. So we were extremely caught off guard when he died in our home. It was December 27th of 2020. Because it was so out of character. He was living just a great life. And by all accounts from his friends, he was happy and just really thriving. He had just submitted his applications for the University of California 3 weeks before he died. And 3 months after he died, we received all of his acceptance letters, including to UCLA, which was kind of his dream UC school. So he never got to realize those dreams that he had worked so hard for. He was robbed of all of that by a deceitful counterfeit pill. And I'll let Chris explain what happened to him that terrible day.
I'm sorry for your loss, Laura and Chris. Chris, can you tell us a little bit about the day that you lost your son, Zachary?
Sure, it's good to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to share our story. As Laura said, Zach was larger than life. He was running on all 8 cylinders, and he had a lot going. He was a big man on campus, involved in scouting, track, soccer, the play, like Laura mentioned, a self-taught musician. So it was really unusual for any nefarious activity that could potentially end anyone's life, or certainly Zach's life. But shortly before he died, a few days before he died, he was in a public place and was approached by a drug dealer on Snapchat. And Zach had no history with this person. He had no contact with him before. To the best of our knowledge, he had never made contact with a would-be drug dealer. This was something that was new. And the drug dealer offered him a prescription pill, told him it was a Percocet. And Zach took the Percocet when he got home a few nights later. A few nights later, he took the Percocet after he got home, hanging out with friends. And the day before he died, he came home a little earlier than we expected, and Zach asked to see a movie with us. It was Christmas time, and it was our tradition to watch as many different Christmas movies, and that's something he liked. Zach loves family, and loves traditions and things that involved being together, and he relished that. And so, of course, we were doing that, and it was Zach's siblings was there, and we watched a movie, and it was a little after midnight, I think, by the time we were done, or maybe it was just before midnight, and he went to bed, and he acted normal, was behaving normal, didn't appear to be stressed out about anything. And the next day, it was a little after lunchtime, I went to check on Zach, and he was no longer with us. And I'm a former military veteran, and my training kicked in, and I started CPR. I remembered our middle child was not far away, so I yelled at him, his name is Sam, and asked him to call 911. And the 911 operator assisted with CPR until with the timing of the compressions and things, until first responders showed up. And then they attempted, and after a short period, the decision was made that he's no longer with us. It was too late. Around then, we had more people show up. I think at one point we had about a dozen people there, sheriff, police, fire, EMTs, and then the coroner showed up. And after a couple hours of examining our home, they said, Chris, this is a mystery. We're ruling out suicide. It appeared that Zach just fell asleep and never woke up. And they didn't find any drugs or paraphernalia in his room. And for someone who has any kind of drug history, that's a little unusual. So they thought maybe he died from a natural cause or fentanyl. And that's what confused us. Why would they even say the word fentanyl? Because how does that get into our home? And how does that get into our child's body? It's just, we had no fentanyl in the house before, never even talked about fentanyl and the presence of fentanyl and anything else. So it was a surprise to us. That started our journey on trying to understand the problem and learn that we're not alone, and that there are so many variations in this scourge of people being duped or deceived, whether they're taking what they think is a legitimate pharmaceutical grade product like a prescription pill, or someone who's struggling with substance use disorder or self-experimenting and consuming something that they think is one thing but actually has been made of fentanyl or is adulterated with fentanyl, and they're unwittingly taking something that's too powerful, and then they die from it. And that's why we're here.
In terms of this, great tragedy, on, that's befallen on Zach and your family. What have you and Chris, you and Laura have done to try to highlight and spotlight this epidemic in honor of Zach?
Well, once we got the confirmation that it was fentanyl, and it's a tough decision to make, to be so public. We didn't want to tarnish our son's memory. He was so well thought of. He was doing so great. But as we started talking with our neighbors and friends and others, and we realized there was this huge information gap, that our kids were falling into, that we just knew we had to be a part of the solution and spread information. So quite quickly, we got connected to a nonprofit organization that I'm now on staff with starting this month, but we've been volunteering with prior for months now, called Song for Charlie. I encourage people to visit songforcharlie.org. The parents that they lost their son, 22 years old, Charlie Ternan, and they had about an 8-month head start, on this learning curve. And so they've been tremendously helpful, just in really bringing us up to speed on this crisis. And we just really wanted to be a part of the solution. So now we go to schools, we go to middle schools and high schools. We share Zach's story. We educate people on, fentanyl in general, but very specifically as well, the counterfeit pills, because that seems to be what really the younger, the middle school, high school kids are really falling victim to. Is the deceit in these counterfeit pills. So, it can be hard. There are people that want to victim blame our child or parent shame us, but I just tune that noise out, because at the end of the day, I'm standing in front of these kids who need this information so they can make a better informed choice. If Zach had been armed with this information, he would never have made this choice. But he didn't know this, and we didn't know to warn him of this. So we just know the best way to honor him is, and he would want us to do this. I mean, he would absolutely say, don't worry about what people think about me, Mom and Dad, worry about my peers and saving their lives.
One of the things I'd like to add is, Ed Ternan said it well. I like to use how he expresses it. Losing a child's at the top of a good parent's grief hierarchy, and suddenly losing a child adds a layer of intensity, kind of like a lightning strike out of nowhere that destroys everything. And not to take away a family who suffers watching a child suffer from a long-term illness, that there's pain there as well. But when it's an unexpected, it adds a layer of intensity. But when it's from a danger you've never heard of, it causes extreme disorientation and extreme confusion, and it sets you down this unrecoverable path of debilitating torment, like you can't stop from drowning. So part of our grief coping was to reach out to other families or to connect with them, that they reached out to us and we responded asking for ways to cope. And in that way, in that journey of how do we move forward with this, we were learning their stories and started to realize that this is an out of control problem, and that this isn't isolated. This isn't a onesie twosie thing. This is affecting a significant number of people. And that's, I think, meeting these other families those first few months after Zach died really showed us that there is a serious out of control problem. And it's not just the demographic of counterfeit prescription pills, but people who suffer from or struggle with substance use disorder like heroin, cocaine, their product is being adulterated with fentanyl, and they're dying from it. So absolutely, we need to get the word out. We need to bring awareness. And so our journey to promote our advocacy was through, it just evolved while we were learning how to cope with this. And like Laura said, we've been through to a lot of schools. We're reaching out to school districts to try to share a curricula. We've co-organized a number of rallies at our Capitol. I also We both have worked with several nonprofits. Another one is stopthevoid.org or Void. They're also into advocacy and bringing awareness, and they're hoping to try to effect change in Capitol Hill so that social media platforms aren't so easily to sell illegal products like this. So there's many lanes, there's many opportunities to try to bring advocacy and awareness and to make a safer place.
As a parent myself, it's heartbreaking to hear Laura and Chris, you talk about it, and I've heard you talk about Zachary before and what happened, but thank you so much for sharing the story and turning the tragedy into trying to prevent other tragedies from happening. So thank you so much. Allyssia, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your brother who died when he was 23 years old?
My name is Allyssia, my youngest sibling. He was the youngest sibling of 6. We lost him September 7th of 2020. The day before, September 6th, we had celebrated my son's 10th birthday and everything was normal. He came home early Sunday morning, which was kind of odd from him being gone all weekend. So we just guessed that he was with friends and kind of just came home early. So he spent all day Sunday with us, normal, just hanging out, saying my son happy birthday, and we all went to bed. The next day we got up, it was a holiday, so kids were out of school and they're waiting around for him to come out of his room. He was going to do some paint art with them. So they had been waiting in a while. But it wasn't odd for him to come out of his room until about noon or 1, because sometimes he stays up late gaming, online all night with his friends. So when it had reached about 6 p.m. and he hadn't came from his room yet, we thought that it was, we knew that he was home. So I went to go check on him, and that's when I found him unresponsive. So I yelling his name. I went to start chest compressions, but when I touched him, he was cold. So he already had passed some time, like in the early morning. The paramedics arrived along with the coroner, and while doing their investigation, she did find a little bag of pills. And in appearance, the pills seemed to be a Percocet and an Adderall. And because of the COVID epidemic, we didn't get confirmation from toxicology until about February, so some months later. But it was confirmed that the pills that she did find were 100% fentanyl. They were 100% fentanyl. No Percocet, nothing in them at all. But already from her investigation, she was asking us if he had any previous medical conditions, was he unhealthy in any other way? So from her findings of the pills, she already kind of told us, well, it's most likely going to be fentanyl poisoning, because if he was healthy, young guy, there should be no reason why something like this would happen to him. So from her saying fentanyl, I just started researching into it, and I found Zach's story. And I got connected with Laura and Chris, and ever since then, I just been active in bringing awareness to my community, along with co-organizing some rallies for different organizations, nonprofit. This whole thing just kind of caught me off guard. I didn't know that we were in the middle of an opioid epidemic inside of a worldwide pandemic with, the COVID. So it really took a big toll on my family. It changed everything. My Cal could have had a really he had the opportunity to still do things with his life, and he was just starting to work and actually shape into the man he was going to grow up to be. And we don't get to see that now. This was very unexpected, not something that I ever thought would happen to me or anybody, that I knew. It's a very tragic and hard way to lose a loved one like this. It's been almost 2 years, and it still is very hard to this day to talk about it. When I talk about it, I'm just reliving that moment. And he was my baby brother. We're 8 years apart. So.
Allyssia, I'm sorry for your loss as well. If there was something that you could say to other families, something that you could warn people about, what would you say to them?
It's, a lot of people think, well, this can't happen to me. My children know better. And they don't think they should educate themselves on it. And it's really something that everybody should be aware of. Everybody, even if you don't think that your kids are doing it, you might, think that they are a little bit, just have the talk with them. This needs to be out there in the community. People need to be aware of this. If we were aware and had the education and, awareness like how there is now, with the Facebook groups and a lot of nonprofits, people reaching out, if we would have had this information, we could have, I'm pretty sure that Michael would have made the decision to not take a pill for whatever reason that it was. I don't know, and I won't ever know, but I'm pretty sure he would have made the smart decision not to do that. These kids are taking these prescription pills because they think that, okay, it's from a doctor. This is the safest way I can possibly experiment with anything without having any bad consequences to it. They're thinking it's medication. It's from a doctor. It's okay. A doctor wouldn't prescribe this if it was going to, hurt me. But with this, it's not the case anymore. There's counterfeit pills going around everywhere, and you don't know what's real and you don't know what's fake. And these kids are taking that risk because they are uneducated of what the problem is going around right now. Don't think that that you shouldn't have the talk with your kids. You really should. When this happened to my brother, all my children were home. My oldest is in high school now. And I still fear for him. I know that he had to experience losing his uncle, and he knows the reason why like that, but I'm still sure that from the influence of friends and peer pressure and just the way that these TikTok videos are trending for kids to, hey, do this challenge and do this challenge, how much that is of an influence to kids. I'm not 100% sure that my son would absolutely stay away from that, even though he knows the consequences, even though he's lost a family member. I just don't know what type of influences there are out there, and I can't be around and watch over my son's shoulder 24/7. I have to kind of just let him make his own decisions, and that scares me. It scares me because there is no awareness in high schools or middle schools or anything like that in here in the Sacramento community.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing, that even if you think, with us, with Zach, we had no indication that he was even inclined to experiment or self-medicate, that the conversation has to include from a young age that fentanyl is out there, that it's easily accessible by our kids, that it's being used deceptively. The kids need to understand, even if they are this straight A student that you would never imagine, never in our wildest dreams could we have predicted that our son would die from a drug death. In a million years would we have expected that. But if we had heard a news story, or he had had a class, in high school talking about, hey, there is deception going on and you guys are being targeted, on social media, you're being targeted to think that what you think is a recognizable name brand medication is actually right now the most dangerous thing that you could do. He'd be here. We're 1000% sure, that would not be a risk he would have taken, but he didn't know, he didn't understand that. And I think that's where we just tell every parent when we're in front of them, like, this is happening to the families you're sitting on the sidelines with at the soccer game, that you're shaking hands with after church service. Like it's happening to every, like you said in the beginning, every demographic, boys, girls, young, old, but especially with the kids, their growth rate in deaths to this is going up higher than any other demographic, this teenage group of people. And it's incredibly alarming.
I think for our viewers, I want to sort of give a very brief summary of what's going on with fentanyl in this sense. The fentanyl, it's being produced in China. It's then being shipped to Mexico. The cartel is taking the fentanyl because it's cheaper than other forms of drugs. They're taking that fentanyl, they're cutting, meaning they're putting that fentanyl into drugs, and they're counterfeiting drugs. And if you were to put up an oxy pill or a Percocet pill, that one that's counterfeit and one that is real, you couldn't tell them apart. And they're putting the cartel, the fentanyl in there, so to increase their profit margin. Those counterfeit drugs are then coming across the border into the US. And our kids, what's happening is they're using Snapchat and social media to order drugs, or their friends are, because they're feeling anxiety, maybe COVID, maybe school, maybe whatever it is. And next thing you know, they're taking this one pill. And so I know that after listening and hearing about Chris and Laura and Allyssia and all these other cases, I sat down and talked with my kids. And I think every parent, I think the message is here, talk to your kids. If the pill isn't from a doctor and it's not obtained from a pharmacy, then it's counterfeit. And if it's counterfeit, it contains fentanyl. And all it takes is one pill to kill. That's all it takes. And I think that from listening to Chris and to Laura and to Allyssia and so many other people, I think that's the message, right? One pill can kill. And if you're not getting it from a pharmacy, you're not getting it from a doctor, then it's counterfeit. And if it's counterfeit, it's got fentanyl in it.
Another thing to add, Thien, is that in September of 2021, DEA Administrator Ann Milgram reported that the DEA estimates about 40% or up to 40% of the counterfeit pills that they have seized are considered to have the potential to be lethal. 40%. It's a significant number. It's a big risk. And like Laura mentioned and Allyssia mentioned, is that when a person is taking something they don't realize is counterfeit or something that's been adulterated, it can be very dangerous. And if a person thinks that, well, this is the safest path, when in fact it's the most dangerous, is because of those statistics. That's playing Russian roulette. But instead of one bullet in the barrel, you're playing with Russian roulette with 2 or sometimes 3 bullets in the barrel, or almost like a bullet in every other chamber. And no one's going to ever want to play Russian roulette with those odds. Well, when you're 15 or 14 or 17 or in your 20s, taking something you have no idea that it's fentanyl, it's sad. It's incredibly tragic to think these people are playing Russian roulette or these incredibly risky odds and not realizing that they're doing that. The other thing is, I believe it was the middle of December of 2021, the DEA estimated that they had seized 20.4 million counterfeit pills. And that an estimate based on a operations director from the Customs Border and Protection Agency estimated that they only seize about 5% that comes through the border. So if 20 million is 5%, then theoretically 95% have gotten through, and that's just 1 year of trafficking. And if 40% are considered lethal, Just like Laura said, it's the players on the soccer field or the parents that they're affecting those families. It's all around us, and we have to, let people know that you may think that it's a distant threat, but it's not. It's right next to you.
Thank you for giving us those statistics from law enforcement and the first responders. And speaking of law enforcement and first responders, I'd like to turn to Chief White. Chief White, can you please introduce yourself and tell us what you do for a living?
Sure. First, thank you for having me on, and really thank you for your commitment to this just critical public awareness campaign. Walt White, Fire Chief with the Amador Fire Protection District, but I've spent a significant portion of my career working in Sacramento County, Sacramento City, at this point, the better life in the fire service, 35 years. And about 70% of the calls that our crews respond to are EMS related. And, our personnel are trained and they're equipped. But, there's been an increase in not just behavioral health, substance use disorder, and these overdoses, they, sometimes they're accidental, or somebody is even unknowingly drugged, so there's no stigma, there's no judgment to this. This is just something, this is a condition that needs to be treated, and it needs to be treated immediately. My brother, Vince, he died when he was 59 of an opioid overdose. And, he's not like either one of the stories we've heard today. He was an adult. He didn't choose college, so he worked a series of, manually intensive jobs, and he, accumulated injuries associated with aging and manual labor. And he had surgeries, shoulder surgeries, knee surgeries, and he would get prescribed opioids. And, they serve a purpose. They're a very powerful pain reliever. But my brother, he never had an issue with smoking. He never had an issue with alcohol. But he got addicted to opioids. And we actually, he was living with one of my older brothers. I'm one of six. I have three older brothers, and my brother Vince was the one who was closest to me. I looked up to him. He was a very good baseball player. We were roommates as kids. He was not just a brother. He was a son. He was a father. One of his favorite things is, his son Nick would come out to visit every summer, and we would all get together as family and go to a Giants baseball game. I mean, he loved baseball. He loved the Giants. He loved his son Nick, and he loved those gatherings where we all got together. We'd usually ride the ferry from Vallejo over to the game, catch a game. But during the last couple of years with, things, being shut down, we weren't able to do that. And I think, that took its toll on him psychologically as well. And my brother, who he was living with, noticed, that his subtle changes in social interaction became more obvious, and he reached out to us, and we got together with him, and he agreed to go into rehab. And he was only 3 weeks out of rehab when he relapsed. And my brother, who went to go check on him, he was equipped with naloxone, but it was too late. And it's not uncommon for someone to relapse within weeks of getting out of rehab. And it's nearly impossible for to supervise 24/7 an adult with a smartphone. It's a pretty tall task. And even having awareness, it was such a powerful addiction that it claimed his life, and it got the better part of him. And as I said, there's no stigma attached to this. This can happen to anyone, regardless of age. This is not rural, a suburban, issue. We see it everywhere. And, I've worked in high volume EMS systems in Sacramento City and Sacramento County. And, we've had our encounters, and I've seen naloxone being successfully administered. But, when we talk about naloxone, I think one of the things that's really important is to have that understanding of just how potent and powerful fentanyl is, because it does have its purpose as a powerful pain reliever. It's its medicinal purpose, but fentanyl is 50 to 100 times more powerful than morphine, and a single medical dose of fentanyl by IV is about 125 milligrams. And fentanyl in concentration, at the size of a grain of sand, or a grain of salt, is about 60 micrograms. So really 2 grains of salt in a pill would be like a medical dose. And like you had mentioned, when this is being cut and, when this is non-pharmaceutical mixing, that, the purity, the quality, none of that is guaranteed. And, we're seeing the overwhelming amount that's being confiscated is counterfeit, and it's at a quality where one pill can kill you. It's a lethal dose.
So Chief White, you mentioned naloxone. Can you kind of explain for our audience what that is and how it's administered?
So yes, opioids attach to the receptors of the central nervous system, and naloxone is a reversal agent. And what I have is a 4 milligram, dose. This is a Narcan or naloxone, what we call naloxone nasal atomizer. And it's designed and intended for the layperson to use as a nasal spray, on the thin membranes of the mucous membranes. And, really, if you can, I don't want to overcomplicate this. If you can, if you can administer a nasal spray, you can administer naloxone. And there are no negative consequences. If you even suspect somebody is in an opioid overdose or induced coma, where you can't wake them or arouse them. And when the opioid, is too much and it attaches to the central nervous system, it'll slow the breathing to the point of them cease breathing altogether. This reversal agent, you put it up the nostril and you give it a squeeze, and one dose of that should, therefore it interferes with the opioid's ability to attach to the receptors of the central nervous system, and it'll even block that, but only temporarily. One dose of naloxone should be enough to bring somebody out, but if it isn't, you can attempt a second dose, 2 to 3 minutes after the first dose. But what's really important is, naloxone or Narcan will only last in the system anywhere from 20 to 90 minutes max, where the opioid will last for hours. So it's really important that even after administering naloxone or Narcan, if the person does come around, become responsive, that you're not out of the woods. That person still needs to be medically evaluated. They need to be transported by EMS personnel. They need to be seen and evaluated in a hospital, or they can very likely slip right back into an opioid-induced coma.
So, Chief White, can you tell us a little bit about the Good Samaritan laws and what that is about?
Yeah, the good, in essence, as long as you're not acting outside of your scope and you are going to do what you believe is in the best interest of the other person, even if, and it really, the analogy you see is if there's a car crash and the car's on fire and you further injure the person reaching in and pulling them out, but you're doing it to get them away from the immediate threat, that you can't be held liable for those injuries, even if your actions help create them, because you were acting in a way that was in the best interest, that you truly believed is in the best interest of the person. You didn't have the intent. And that's the thing, what's great about naloxone is it is, it's very, very rare for somebody to have any kind of a naloxone allergic reaction. So, with most certainty, there's no real negative consequences for administering this to somebody who is not in an opioid overdose. But I would say, do not be afraid to act in what you believe is in the person's best interest. Even if you're not 100% sure of what you're doing, as long as you're not going above and beyond, your training, then you are protected under the Good Samaritan Act.
Great, thank you. You talk about taking actions, and earlier, Allyssia, you were talking about some of the collaboration and actions that you've taken since your brother passed away. What are some of the things that you've done in regards to collaboration and working with other people to raise awareness?
This will be the second year that I've worked with a nonprofit called Appalled People Against Association of People Against Lethal Drugs. And I co-organized last year along with Laura and Chris. We did a rally at the Capitol. This year I'll be organizing the same rally, and it's just to bring awareness. And with that, it's a worldwide thing. They do them we have a group online on Facebook, and they do them in everywhere. They do them in other states, but we try to, it's done worldwide all at the same time. So even though it's different time zones and all that, we still make it to where it is all happening at one time. So there's just a bunch of people from all over who fentanyl has affected them in these ways of losing their loved ones, that we all rally together same day, same time to bring awareness. And this will actually be the second year that we're going to be doing that. I've also worked with the district attorney, Anne Marie Schubert, in the public awareness campaign, One Pill Can Kill, SAC.com. I've done some PSAs, shared my story about Michael on there. I've did a story and a news story with the Sacramento Bee, CBS 13. So right now I'm kind of taking a break from all that, and I'm hoping to get back to it soon. I'm trying to start my own nonprofit. I want to get this more into the schools. I don't see it into the schools, and I have a high schooler and a middle schooler next year. So I would really like this to be part of a health class, or just something that can, bring awareness to them. I don't see that this issue is an issue that's going away anytime soon, this problem that we're having. And I would hate for anyone else to lose their child or loved one in this kind of way. Because like Chris was saying, when you lose someone like so sudden like this, it's very intense. It's very overwhelming. And some people are strong enough to, at least try to get through that, but others are not, to where it completely affects them and it changes their whole life forever.
Well, you mentioned the awareness program that the district attorney's office has been engaged in for the last several months. The Sacramento DA's office, we've been working on an awareness campaign, including a safety fair and a town hall as well. And I know that many of you all of you, I believe, have participated in that as well. Laura, can you talk a little bit about some of the collaboration that you and Chris have done, particularly in the schools? And I know you mentioned that a little while ago, but can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Sure. Basically, any school that extends an invitation for us to come, we make sure to make that happen. We have found kind of a good agenda for when we're able to do them in person. It's preferable, but we've had to do a lot, virtual as well, and those work out fine. But we try to have someone there from law enforcement or district attorney, someone from the office that can talk as you're doing, about what's being seen in the community and crime labs, things like that. Then we can speak our personal impact story, and how it's impacted our family, giving data like Chris presented, statistics and data around what's affecting this demographic, our middle school and high school kids, what language parents need to be aware of and communicating with their children about this danger. And then we also like to have someone there who is a representative, whether it be a mental health counselor in the district or in the community, a wellness center, that can talk to, the resources that are safe for kids to explore, rather than going to their smartphone and thinking that they're getting a legitimate Xanax or Adderall, educating them that they absolutely need to take that off the table, because they will get something counterfeit, undoubtedly, and very good likelihood that it could contain a fatal dose of fentanyl. And so then offering, the ways that they can safely, if they are dealing with stress or anxiety, that they can safely go. I mean, we found with COVID and doctor appointments were, restricted and in person. And I think some kids like Zach or some other kids that maybe felt like, well, I don't really have a quote mental health issue. I don't feel depressed or suicidal, but I might be feeling a little anxious about college applications, or a little stressed out because it's my senior year and everything's locked down and I'm not getting to do all the fun stuff I used to do. And they might Google Xanax or something like that, recognizable pharmaceutical thing, and think, well, I've heard I could get that from someone on Snapchat. And so we just really try to make sure to impress upon them that this is the reality of what is out there. We also talk about the Good Samaritan laws, because a lot of times we've talked to parents where their child was in distress, but the group of friends, that they were with were either scared or didn't realize it was like threatening distress, thought, oh, they'll sleep it off, and don't get medical care right away because they're frightened, so we try to make sure the young kids understand, like, look, if your friend, if you can't wake them up, if they're snoring really loudly, if you're worried in any way, you call 911 right away. You will not get in trouble. You'll be a hero because you'll be saving someone's life. And we try to get the kids involved, like at Whitney High School, where Zach was a student. They did a press conference class in their journalism class. So they had Chris and I there. The students knew some background about Zach, and then they ran it like a press conference. They were learning how to ask questions and follow-up questions and then craft an article around it. At Rockland High, they did it with their broadcast department, and an interview like that, where then they had to prepare for the interview and then edit together the story that ran for their student body. So the more we can even actively engage the students in becoming the teachers, where we can instruct them on what's going on and then empower them to teach each other. Because like Allyssia said, with regard to her son, and they sometimes, even if you have the information, these young people can feel invincible or it won't happen to me or that kind of thing. But I think when we really pull them into being peer-to-peer instructors, maybe that can also impress upon them the serious nature of it. We're just trying to figure out ways to get to have them even more engaged and involved.
Well, I want to really thank everyone for today for not only being on this podcast, but really everyone here who have experienced such tragedy and heartbreak in your own life, but to take that tragedy and transform it, and for your great work in terms of spreading awareness of the dangers of fentanyl poisoning. If people want to learn more about it, I would encourage you to go to onepillcankill.org. onepillcankillsac.com, onepillcankillsac.com. And we will put that in this podcast. Chris, you did raise your hand. Did I?
I just want to, before, I guess, parting words, I think this is also an important note, and I apologize for kind of bringing this in last, but I wanted to expand on something Laura touched upon, and that's about communicating with teens and your family members. Our biggest challenge that I've seen is the stigma that gets connected to our messages, and for those families who have very little or no history of drug challenges in their family, they tend to compartmentalize and think that this won't happen to them and it's not going to affect my kid. And we as grieving parents and grieving family members are here to tell you, if you're thinking that, you're dead wrong, because this is a much more prevalent threat than you may realize. So specifically with older siblings or parents or other family members and caregivers, it's critical to have a sit down, show them a video, show them a news conference, a press conference, or talk to them about what a parent has learned, and say, listen, I'm really worried. I'm super concerned because it's so lethal. And to have a real honest talk with your loved ones that could potentially be very vulnerable to this danger, and it's something that absolutely needs to be stressed upon. So there are different ways. Obviously, it's not something that can happen in one sitting necessarily. But if the message comes across initially as, look, I've learned about this danger. I'm worried about you. You're in middle school. You're in high school. You're in college. You're around friends, and I trust your judgment, but I also want you to know that there's a potential of you are being deceived or could be deceived, or one of your friends could be deceived, and just continue that message for them, because if a family feels like, oh, this wouldn't happen to us, and they don't bring that message up, that's what really worries us, and that absolutely needs to be stressed. You have to talk to your family members about this.
Chris, thank you so much for adding that point. I mean, you're absolutely right. First thing is we have to have the awareness, and then really the communication and the conversations with our children. So thank you so much for that. And to everyone, I know that you've experienced such heartache and tragedy, and it's quite inspiring to see you turn that tragedy and that heartache into something positive by spreading the awareness of the dangers of fentanyl. And we really appreciate you being here today to share that story with our viewers and our listeners. Thank you so much. And if our viewers want to learn more, we encourage you to go to onepillcankillsac.com. That's onepillcankillsac.com to learn more. Again, thank you everybody for being here today and sharing with us your stories, your struggles, and what you're trying to do to raise awareness about this. Thank you.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can find all of the Justice Journal podcasts on our website at sacda.org, iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube.